Hello guys, today we are going to set up Raspberry Pi Zero W without any display. First, we need to download the Raspbian OS from the official website. Go to www.raspberrypi.org and here go to Downloads. In Downloads, go to Raspberry Pi OS. Now there are three different types of Raspberry Pi OS available in the official website. The first two Raspberry Pi images have a pre-installed desktop environment and some recommended softwares. Since we are using the Raspberry Pi W as a headless device, I will be downloading the Raspberry Pi OS Lite. Since I have already downloaded the file, I have extracted the image onto my desktop. Now let's prepare the SD card. Open SD card formatter and first format your SD card. Select the SD card drive and click format. Once the format is complete, now open Win32 disk imager. Now select the correct SD card drive if you have more than one USB devices connected to your system. Navigate to your image file and write to the SD card. Writing the image to the SD card will take a while, but once the writing is completed, now we have to do a small configuration. Open the file manager and go to the boot folder on the SD card and you will find a file called config.txt. Open this file and scroll to the end of the file and we need to add one line. Which is enable underscore UART is equal to 1. So what this will do is it will enable the UART interface and also it will enable the serial console on the serial interface. I'm just placing a comment. Once this is done, eject the SD card from your system and place it in the Raspberry Pi and now it's time to boot up. Now before booting up the Pi, we need to connect a USB to TTL converter to our Raspberry Pi serial interface. And looking at the Raspberry Pi 0 and Raspberry Pi 0W's pin diagram, you can see that there are two pins TXT and RXT pins on the 40 pin header. We need to connect our serial terminal, the pins from our TTL converter to these pins. Once the pins are connected, let's boot up the Raspberry Pi. First, let's open PuTTY, which is a serial terminal interface that we can use to communicate with the Raspberry Pi. So this is the PuTTY configuration window. Let's select serial and enter the COM port which is connected to our Raspberry Pi and enter the baud rate. By default, Raspberry Pi serial terminal has a baud rate of 115200. So enter the speed and then click open. Now this will open a window, and now let's power up the Raspberry Pi. When the Pi boots up for the first time, it will expand its file system. So it will take a bit time. It will expand its file system and then reboot again. And then we will be seeing, see as we are seeing the serial console logs. Now the Pi is booting up. And we are going to get the login. Now we got the Raspberry Pi login console. The default username is Pi and password will be Raspberry. And now we have logged in into our system. Now if we check the network interfaces, there are only two interfaces, which is loopback and WLAN 0. Now let's connect our Raspberry Pi to a Wi-Fi network. We can do this in two ways. The easiest way is using raspi-config. You type sudo raspi-config and you will get a console menu. Go to network options, go to wireless LAN, and first time it will ask the locality. I am going to select India and then it will ask for SSID and password. Once that is done, select finish. And now if we see, our Raspberry Pi is connected to the Wi-Fi and it has got an IP address. But before concluding this configuration, we need to do one more step so that we can access it without the serial console again. So go to the raspi-conf again, go to interface options and enable SSH. SSH is the remote login system for Linux systems. So it will ask for the confirmation, click yes. And now the SSH server is enabled. Click on finish and it's done. We can try to log in from another terminal via SSH. This is my Linux shell. Now we are going to SSH into the Raspberry Pi using its wireless interface. Now we got the IP addresses 192.168.24.56. So SSH username is pi at the rate of 192.168.24.56. When it is for first time, it will ask for the addition of fingerprint. Click yes, and then password, which is raspberry again, default password. And now we have logged in into Raspberry Pi. And from here on, we don't require the serial console to use the Raspberry Pi because we are able to access SSH. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you have any suggestions, please comment down in the comment box below.